So, Sarah, tell me, how did you hear about the Content Club?
So the Content Club was brought to me by John Farron. He just called me one day and said that he was formulating an idea, and we chatted about it, and he asked me if I'd be interested in jumping on board, and I was, because John and I have got similar feelings about the amount of history that's on television or not on television, and also about sharing the sort of production process with the audience, and feeling kind of more in touch with the audience. And of course, I would say this, returning more creative autonomy to the directors, the creative team.
Okay, you've worked with John before, in particular on Digging for Britain. What would be different about the process of making a program for the Content Club, and why is this an advantage for PDs? I mean, John was talking to me about how this is going to give you much more control. In what sort of way?
So first of all, we're not making it for a strand. There's no kind of, it needs to be this length, it needs to feature this many stories, it needs to be ready by, well, we do have a deadline, but it's not a channel setting it, it's something that we can talk about as being realistic. So we'll have, I've worked on quite a lot of things lately that have enormously squeezed production periods, and this, we will give ourselves a proper amount of time to make a good quality documentary. And so we're originating the ideas. There are ideas that we're bringing to the Content Club, and we will just have a lot more sort of, we will know our budget, and then it will be up to me, and when I'm making a film, in consultation with John, who will be the executive producer, to make the best film that I can. That will be, the constraint will be, make the best film that I can, which is really exciting.
Okay, let's talk about the detail of your program. The title is The Empire's First War, and war is my business, as you know, Sarah. And I have to say, I'd never heard of this war, which makes it incredibly exciting. It takes place in Roman times during the reign of Emperor Augustus, and it's against the Iberian Celts. So tell us a little bit more about it and how on earth you came across this idea.
So I hadn't heard of it either, and I was working on a different program, a series, and during the research for that series, I came across this story, and I had to sort of park it. But as soon as I came across it, this series I was working on was a kind of magazine show looking for little stories. I could see how big this story was, partly because of the breadth of the story and the characters that it involves, and also because of the fact that it is, like you say, not very well known. It's hugely overlooked, both in ancient history and by modern historians.
Okay, and so give me a kind of summary of the story, the sort of beats of the story, and then we can discuss a bit about what's going to be original in your program. I mean, it goes without saying that every new history doc has to have sort of, great new access, but you also need a brilliant story to begin with, and this one, from the outline I've heard, sounds like it's got it all.
Yeah, so the overall story is the Cantabrian Wars, which is the Emperor Augustus's campaign against the northern tribes of Spain. So Rome has been trying for many years to capture the whole of the Iberian Peninsula for itself, and it's got most of it, but it's not been able to quash these northern mountain tribes. They fight the kind of war that Rome hates: guerrilla warfare, hit and run attacks, disappearing back into the mountains. They have a fearsome reputation, the Cantabrians. Roman armies feared them because they had fought with them and used that skill in warfare for themselves. But now Augustus is almost like, I see it almost like it's the way he's going to prove himself. He's become emperor, and he's going to once and for all squash these pesky northern tribes in Spain. So the story is great because it's got the Emperor Augustus, the first emperor. So, you know, he's an exciting character, and it's ancient Rome in a time when, you know, the army is transformed. It's a time of kind of upheaval as well for Rome. But also the archaeology of this war, of this campaign, it's a 10-year campaign, is still there in the mountains. It's largely untouched and undiscovered for many reasons. And the archaeology, I've worked on a lot of archaeological programs, is really exciting because you can almost tell the entire campaign through the archaeology that's there, or at least, you know, the stuff that we can realistically access. So if you pick one site, you will, and this is typical of the sort of sites that you find. I'm thinking of Monte Benorio, which is a kind of a major site. There's the Iron Age, what is called oppidum, a fortified city, and all of the archaeology that speaks of the people that lived there and had lived there for centuries. And then you have the battle unfolding. So you have the camp where the Romans initially set up camp before battle. You have the archaeology spread out across the plateaus in between, where they have made their various approaches across the plateaus. You have you can almost forensically tell the story of the final battle through the archaeology that's scattered throughout the site. You can tell where the battle began, how it progressed, where the final fighting was, and also then what happened afterwards. So the destruction of the site, but then the fort that was built to house the Romans, because obviously, you know, they stayed there afterwards. And then in some cases, and certainly in this case, the fort becomes more permanent, and you start to see the stuff of life of Romans. So the kind of things that you would recognize from, you know, Roman towns elsewhere. So Roman bathhouses and swimming pools and untouched Roman mosaics, as well as, you know, the food, the glasses that they're drinking wine out of, the bits of clothing and jewelry. And then in some cases that then became a town. It's the foundation of a town that still exists today. In other cases not. That's where it ends. But you have the entire arrival, battle, aftermath in the archaeology.
Extraordinary, because the problem we've got with Roman times, as I've known, having written a little bit of the military history of that period, is being able to piece the story together. I mean, for example, Julius Caesar's, you know, Gallic campaigns, 58 to 50 BC, it's guesswork. You know, we've got Caesar's own account of it, but the actual detail, to be able to piece together in the sort of detail you're talking about, a hugely significant campaign. I mean, I'm only realizing it now as you're talking. 10 years, I think the numbers were 50,000. So that's 8 legions. Now, one of the most famous battles in military history is in the Teutoburger Wald, which takes place a little bit before this, actually, but it also during the Augustan period. And they lose something like, I think, 3 legions. And that's considered to be the biggest disaster in Roman history. So for them to use 8 legions subduing this region gives you an idea of how significant the whole thing is. And yet it has slipped through our fingers as historians. You're not only going to be able to retell the story, you're going to be able to recreate it in extraordinary detail. Tell us a little bit about the archaeologists who you must have, you know, had some contact with, and therefore will be able to piece this story together with.
Yeah, I mean, they're really interesting in themselves. So the lead archaeologist, Dr. Jesus Torres Martinez, difficult for an English speaker to remember and pronounce, it's really his life's work. He learned his craft, ran his trade, his profession, I think he did his PhD there. He grew up in these mountains, and it's his life's work. There's no better way of putting it. And it's his company. He has discovered lots of kind of firsts. You know, it's almost a mission for him to sort of rediscover the people who were living there before, because that in itself is an interesting story. and his mission is to uncover and interpret and research as many of these sites as he possibly can. He's also a mountaineer, so he can access this stuff in a way that other people haven't been able to. He almost had to develop a new form of mountain archaeology to be able to access some of these sites. And yeah, he's just, his passion for it is just, obvious. It's everything to him.
Now, the mountains, in sort of my naive sort of opinion, must bring two elements to this story. On the one hand, they've allowed for the preservation of these sites, because obviously clearly a lot of them are very inaccessible, and therefore, despite the fact that 2,000 years have now gone by, they are, as you say, or at least the archaeology is still intact. But the mountains also are incredibly beautiful. Now, it may give you problems, of course, Sarah, for filming, but it's going to look spectacular on the screen, isn't it? So how are you going to bring the drama of the mountains to life?
Well, I think that, you're absolutely right. I mean, in some ways, visually, it's not difficult because it is so stunning there. They do get a lot of rain, so I'll have to choose my days carefully. But we have the freedom, because it's also not a built-up area, to get lots of aerial footage and just really maximize the landscape, because the kind of sunsets there are incredible, and the view you can see for miles. It's like a painting, basically, looking out. So the landscape will almost be like a character within this story. And I mean, I kind of like to do that in anything that I do, really, is to spend, not just kind of rush a few shots, a few GVs of the background, but really dedicate, probably a day to really, milking the landscape, getting as many beautiful wide shots and aerial footage of it that I can, and choosing my time, because as I said, the sun has a part to play, and the shadows and the mountains, and that bit will be pure pleasure to film.
Now, the payoff for any history documentary is that you really make a contribution to history. I mean, I think that's the intention. Certainly, it's the intention of every author, and I know it must also be the intention of every producer, director of programs like this. But it really does sound to me like you are going to be making a massive contribution with this film. Now, of course, lots of people are involved. You mentioned Dr. Martinez, but putting it all together and explaining it in a way that's accessible for the ordinary viewer is going to bring this story to life. I think it sounds to me, for the first time, and get it to a sort of wider audience, must be incredibly exciting, isn't it?
It's really exciting, and it's really daunting and challenging at the same time, because it's not like in the stage I'm at now, I'm obviously already thinking about it and already, digesting as much as I can, reading as much as I can, but there's not very much out there. I can't just Google, the Cantabrian Wars and the particular mountain and find out everything I need to tell this story. It really is going to be piecing together, all of the information that I can get out of the sites that we look at. But obviously, at the time we go, it's not like, they're digging. This is going to take a long time to get through these sites. So I will have to focus on whatever it is that they happen to be digging. Well, they happen to be digging actually at Monte Bonorio, in the site where the kind of fiercest fighting took place. But yeah, I don't think I've ever made something yet that is quite so genuinely new, so that historians that I'm talking to now kind of say, yeah, we don't know much about this. And of course, there are mentions in ancient Roman texts, but they're vastly superseded by the bigger wars that we know about, Carthage, etc. And what is written is spin most of the time, either wanting to do Augustus down or the opposite. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm at that stage where you have kind of this huge, you can go in any direction, and then gradually over the next however many months it will be kind of refined until we have this coherent and accessible story to tell. And sifting through it and deciding what needs to be on screen is both daunting and exciting.
Now, along the way, I think this is one of the points of the Content Club. You will have some contact with the contact. You will have some contact with the club members. There'll be a little bit of feedback, possibly on script and and plans afoot. Are you going to enjoy that part of the process? Because you could argue, if you're playing devil's advocate, that's sort of that's gonna potentially trip you up. But do you think this is the future of filmmaking?
I do, yeah, and actually, I am quite excited about it. We up to date, everything that I've done before for sort of for the usual major broadcasters, you're really guessing at what the audience wants to see. And it will be amazing during the process to be able to actually connect with that early on. And, who knows what ideas might come from other people. There's certainly things that I've worked on where suddenly the film is made because you stumble across a bit of information. And, that might happen with any film that you make for the Content Club, because, depending on kind of what the subject is, there are going to be people out there who have knowledge, and we can't possibly know who they're going to be. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. Of course, it's an experiment, so it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. But also, we're used as filmmakers and making television documentaries in the sort of the way that we have been, to having feedback and allowing other people into the edit and taking on their opinions and their criticism, and that is part of the job. And obviously, in a way, it will be nicer to have it from the people who are going to be watching, rather than the people who think they know what, we just think we know what the audience wants.
Yeah, I mean, John made the point to me that you're not going to be controlled by the club members. You'll be in a dialogue with them, and you will be influenced by them. And it seems to me to be a sort of perfect balance, really, because as you say, in the past, will have been executive producers coming in, series producers who are just laying down the law and over interfering. So yes, I think, you need to stress that point, don't you? This is the creativity. This is allowing the PDs really full sort of artistic license to make the type of films they want to make, and we'll all have to judge the final product. But I think it's hugely exciting because in terms of my own writing, social media, I contact people on social media, they ask me what I'm doing next, and I mention things without going into too much detail, and you won't believe the number of interesting suggestions that come about as to potential sources or places I might visit, or themes that I might think about. And so I suspect you're going to get some of that, and you won't use it all, but some of it's going to be really, really useful. And as you say, when you make a film, the first time you get a proper response from the audience is when it goes out, and that's the point that it's too late to do anything about it.
Absolutely. And also on the other side, it'll be quite nice to have the ability to actually talk to people about why I'm leaving stuff out, because a big part of filmmaking is what you leave out. With this, if it's a 60-minute film, I have 60 minutes to tell all of this, and it's a huge story. And so, that undoubtedly, when a film is made and people watch it, they missed a trick here. Why didn't they do this? And there's usually, a very valid, it might be a very practical reason why we haven't done it, and it will be nice actually to be able to share that too.
Okay, the other really exciting bit about this, as far as I'm concerned, Sarah, is that you are literally going to be the first film that comes out, fingers crossed, and the fundraising goes to plan, on the Content Club. In other words, you are the guinea pig, but you're also going to go down in history, as it were, if the Content Club goes on, as we all hope it will, and does amazing things, as the first person. You were the first person, you made the first film for the Content Club, completely different way of filmmaking. Is that more exciting than it is nerve-wracking?
Yeah, it is actually. Every now and then I think, oh my God, what am I letting myself in for? But no, it's also really nice to be at the front of something new, because television is changing. And, I think we all feel that the old model isn't really working anymore. So to get out there in front and do this for the first time is really exciting. Yeah. And because I love making films, and I love making films about history. So we're all concerned about the lack of chances to do that. So to be able to open up a new way of doing it is just brilliant.
Okay, final plea from me, Sarah. I've written about Roman warfare. I've appeared in the odd program about Roman warfare, and I would love to get involved in this one because I have never heard a more original story of ancient warfare. In fact, forget about Roman warfare. So please bear me in mind. Very best of luck with it. We've got the fundraising round coming up very soon. That's really the key to the success of this project, but I cannot believe this is not going to fly, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it and hopefully being involved in it.
I'd love you to be involved in it. So yeah, you obviously would make an ideal person to talk about the kind of military strategy, and there'll be a lot of that in this program. So yeah, if that's a formal, if you're formally saying you'd like to be involved, then yes, please.
Brilliant, Sarah. Thanks so much, and very best of luck.